Step out of the vehicle now. The officer's voice cut through the chilled morning air like a switchblade. The traffic around East 14th Street had thickened, horns in the background blaring their own frustrated commentary. Jordan Peterson blinked behind his glasses, unsure what exactly had triggered this. "I'm not resisting," he said calmly, holding both hands up. "There seems to be..." The slap came fast, open palm, a sharp crack across the cheek. It sent Peterson slightly off balance, his back pressing against the cold car door. "You think you're clever? Arguing with me?" the officer barked. "You elitist types always think rules don't apply to you." People nearby started slowing down, a couple of pedestrians pulling out phones. Someone whispered, "Did that cop just hit him?" Peterson straightened up slowly, adjusting his collar. His cheek was flushed red, but his voice stayed even. "I wasn't arguing. I was asking a question." The officer, badge reading L. Hendricks, looked at him again, this time with the faintest flicker of uncertainty. He glanced toward the crowd, the realization crawling in that something here might be going sideways fast. "Let's go. You're under arrest." "For what?" Peterson asked, tone sharp now. "Obstruction, verbal resistance. I gave you a lawful order." A woman in a navy coat stepped forward, recording. "That's Dr. Jordan Peterson," she said loudly. "The professor, the psychologist. Are you out of your mind?" That changed everything. The cop's hand froze over the cuffs. Another officer jogged over from across the street. "What's going on here?" he asked, eyeing Hendricks first, then Peterson, whose face he recognized in seconds. "Oh, God," he muttered under his breath. "Hendricks, do you know who this is?" "I don't care if he's the Pope. That's Jordan Peterson. He's on Senate panels. He lectures around the world. Jesus Christ." Peterson wasn't speaking. He stood still, the red mark across his cheek visible now on every phone screen aimed his way. More people had gathered. Someone live streaming, someone shouting, "This is police brutality." The crowd thickened. The woman in the navy coat turned her phone toward her own face. "I was just walking to the clinic when I saw this officer slap Jordan Peterson in the face. I have it all on camera. I'm uploading it now. This is not okay." Officer Hendricks muttered something, stepping back. The other cop whispered, "You just hit someone half the country follows like a religion. You don't even realize what you've started." From behind them, a man in a suit was already on the phone. "CNN? Yeah, Midtown. Peterson, assaulted. Yeah, it's about to go viral." And just like that, the moment cracked wide open. Si esta historia ya te tocó el corazón, suscríbete al canal y cuéntanos en los comentarios. ¿Qué crees que está pasando realmente? Ahora, continuemos. 4 minutes. That's how long it took. 4 minutes after the slap, Jordan Peterson was trending #1 on Twitter. By then, the video had already been reposted on 3 political subreddits, shared on TikTok, and embedded in a breaking post by the Daily Wire. People weren't just reacting, they were exploding. The footage, captured in perfect 4K from a passerby's phone, showed it all. The slap, Peterson's restraint, the growing panic in the officer's face, and the audible shock of the crowd. One frame even caught Peterson's reddened cheek in the golden winter light, his expression caught between dignity and disbelief. Inside the 13th precinct, chaos rippled like heat off asphalt. Lieutenant Harris slammed the office door shut. "Get Hendricks off the street now." Sergeant Munro leaned forward. "He's in holding. We pulled him. Internal Affairs is already pinging us. Chief's getting calls from the mayor's office. Some congressman from Ohio is screaming on Fox News." "What about Peterson?" "Refused medical treatment, said he's fine." But he gave a statement to 2 journalists before we could contain the scene. Harris let out a low breath, pinching the bridge of her nose. "You can't contain a slap seen by 30 million people." She wasn't exaggerating. By 9:11 a.m., it had reached 32.7 million views. Meanwhile, Jordan Peterson sat alone in a quiet cafe 2 blocks from the incident. The small place, Jenny's, smelled like cinnamon toast and burnt espresso. He stared into his cup, not drinking, while the manager hovered nervously nearby. "Are you sure you don't need anything, sir?" she asked, recognizing him but unsure what to say. Peterson gave a soft smile. "This is fine. Thank you. His cheek was still marked, but he hadn't asked for ice. He hadn't spoken to reporters beyond a single sentence. I'm not interested in vengeance, I'm interested in what this says about power. He repeated that line to himself now, not out loud, but inside, tasting the words, testing their weight. He knew what this would become. Across the country, the reaction was immediate and deeply split. Cable news erupted. Liberal networks raising questions about policing culture and arrogance. Conservative ones focusing on civil liberties and free speech. Old interviews of Peterson resurfaced. So did Senate footage, podcast clips, sound bites. He was suddenly no longer a person, he was a symbol. At the cafe window, a couple stopped and looked in. One pointed, another raised a phone. Peterson didn't move. He wasn't angry. He was thinking, deeply, quietly. Because he knew something most people watching didn't. This wasn't about him, not really. The slap was just a symptom. What came next would be far harder to navigate than a red cheek or an angry crowd. What came next would shake institutions. Si esta historia ya te tocó el corazón, suscríbete al canal y cuéntanos en los comentarios, ¿qué crees que está pasando realmente? Ahora, continuemos. By noon, the White House press secretary was fielding questions about the Peterson incident. I'm not going to comment on an active investigation, she said, eyes tight. But the president believes in the First Amendment and in due process for all Americans, regardless of their views. That non-answer wasn't enough. In Washington, Senator Grant DeVries, never one to miss a headline, called for a federal inquiry. This isn't just about Jordan Peterson. This is about what happens when public servants lose sight of the law they swore to uphold. That soundbite ran on every major outlet before 1 p.m. Meanwhile, in New York, Officer L. Hendricks sat in a beige-walled interview room, his badge already suspended. He looked pale, tired, and cornered. I didn't know who he was, he repeated to Internal Affairs. He was talking back, being difficult. I wasn't thinking, I didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't ask, the investigator said. And now, half the country thinks you struck a man out of pure arrogance. I didn't mean to. That doesn't matter anymore. Across the city, in a quiet hotel conference room, Peterson finally agreed to meet someone from the press. His conditions were simple: no live feeds, no sound bites. Just one journalist, one recorder, and a conversation. It was Maria Benson from The Atlantic, young, sharp, and clearly nervous. Dr. Peterson, she said, clicking the recorder on, how do you interpret what happened yesterday? He looked at her, not angry, not tired, just still. I think it revealed something many already suspected, he said. That authority is no longer grounded in service, but in performance. That officer acted for dominance, not for law. Do you want him fired? I want him to reflect, and I want the system that trained him to ask itself what it's creating. Some are calling you a martyr. Others say you're weaponizing the moment. He chuckled quietly. I'm not interested in being a martyr. But I am aware that symbols don't get to choose how they're used. She sat back, caught off guard. Do you think this will die down? No, he said, because this isn't just about one slap. This is about the fear people feel when the state forgets its place. The interview ended there. Outside the hotel, two protest groups were forming on opposite sidewalks, one with signs saying "Justice for Jordan," the other reading "Power checks power." Cameras turned, anchors leaned into their mics, pundits circled like hawks, and at the center of it all was a quiet man in a blazer, walking out into the afternoon wind like nothing had changed. Except everything had. Si esta historia ya te tocó el corazón, suscríbete al canal y cuéntanos en los comentarios. ¿Qué crees que está pasando realmente? Ahora continuemos. It was a Wednesday when the protests turned into something else. At first, they were just two opposing camps outside the courthouse, chanting, cameras, placards with phrases like "truth over tyranny" and "no one is above the badge." But then a man in a veteran's jacket stepped between the two groups with a megaphone and shouted, "This isn't about left or right. This is about trust." That line hit like lightning. The videos went viral within hours. One man trying to unify a split country. Some cheered, others mocked, but the mood shifted. Back in Toronto, Peterson's daughter, Michaela, had her phone on speaker. "Dad, the foundation servers are crashing. We got $200,000 in donations this morning, and we're not even fundraising." "I'm not keeping a cent," he replied. "Send it all to legal funds for anyone who's faced wrongful force. Make it public." "Are you sure?" "I'm not the point of this story, Michaela. I just became the spark." Meanwhile, at NYPD headquarters, Chief Ramirez faced his most brutal press conference in years. What steps are being taken to reform officer conduct? We're revisiting our training protocols. Do you admit excessive force was used? I admit public trust has been shaken. Is Officer Hendricks cooperating? Pause. He's retained legal counsel. Hendricks, now in hiding, had been advised not to speak, but that didn't stop the leaks. An old body cam clip surfaced of him berating a teenager during a 2021 stop in Harlem. Then another video from a 2022 arrest. His pattern was no longer just one slap, it was becoming a record. The union released a short statement defending him. "We support Officer Hendricks' right to due process." But in private, they were distancing themselves. At Columbia University, Professor Linda Keating opened her sociology lecture with a single sentence. "Today, we'll study the anatomy of public outrage." Behind her, a large screen showed a paused frame of Peterson's face just after the slap, stunned, eyes wide, mouth slightly open. She didn't need to explain the rest. That image had become the symbol of the moment. But not everyone saw it the same way. In Ohio, conservative radio host Ben Marlow lit up the airwaves. "I don't care if it was Peterson or a plumber. This is what you get when state power goes unchecked. This should wake everyone up. Left, right, doesn't matter. Tyranny wears a badge now." Across the country, people weren't just talking about the slap anymore. They were asking bigger questions about the role of police, of media, of intellectuals, and of truth itself. In his hotel room, Peterson watched it all unfold in silence. The news, the marches, the vitriol, the noise. He picked up his pen and wrote a single sentence in his notebook. "If power forgets restraint, it forgets its purpose." He closed the book and waited for what would come next. Si esta historia ya te tocó el corazón, suscríbete al canal y cuéntanos en los comentarios. ¿Qué crees que está pasando realmente? Ahora continuemos. 3 days after the incident, behind a set of mahogany double doors in Washington, D.C., a closed-door meeting was underway in the Senate Judiciary Committee chamber. "This isn't just a PR problem," Senator Cole muttered, adjusting his cufflinks. "This is a constitutional moment. We need to respond before this gets hijacked." "Hijacked?" Senator Ramirez raised an eyebrow. "You mean before people start asking why this happens to people who aren't famous?" The room fell into a tense silence. The slap had broken more than decorum. It had cracked open a long-ignored tension between the public and its institutions. Peterson's name was now being used in arguments for police reform, First Amendment rights, and even campaign slogans. Meanwhile, across town, inside a modest office lit by morning sun, Jordan Peterson sat across from civil rights attorney Rosa McAllen. She leaned back, eyeing him carefully. "We could sue. You'd win. Big." "I'm not interested in money," he said. "Then what?" "I want clarity," he said. "I want this to start a process that doesn't end in media cycles. I want people who've been silenced or slapped, literally or otherwise, to be seen." Rosa nodded slowly. "You know what that costs?" He gave a small smile. "I've already paid part of the price." At that moment, the door opened. Michaela stepped in, phone in hand. "It's Archbishop Daniels," she said. "He wants to meet in person." Peterson blinked. "Why?" He said, "When a country's soul is bruised, we need more than courts. We need confession." Back in New York, Officer Hendricks remained hidden in an apartment borrowed from his cousin. The blinds were drawn, the news off. A half-empty bottle of whiskey sat on the counter. He replayed the slap in his mind. Not out of pride, but shame. It wasn't just what he'd done. It was how fast the truth unraveled, and how much he'd never seen. His wife hadn't called in 2 days. His union had gone quiet. The world that once felt firm beneath him now felt like a stage being torn down. He looked at his badge on the table. Still polished, still whole. He didn't feel the same. Later that night on 60 Minutes, the segment aired. The one everyone had been waiting for. Peterson sat across from the host under soft studio lights. "You've become a reluctant symbol," the host said. "Do you feel responsible for where this is going?" "No," Peterson said, "but I feel accountable for what I do with it now." "And what will you do?" "I'll speak. I'll listen. I'll remind people that dignity is not a luxury of fame. It's a birthright." The segment closed with a silent shot of Peterson walking alone down Fifth Avenue, New York glowing around him, winter wind at his back. And in living rooms across America, people stared, not at a celebrity, but at a man who had been struck and stood still. Si esta historia ya te tocó el corazón, suscríbete al canal y cuéntanos en los comentarios. ¿Qué crees que está pasando realmente? Ahora, continuemos. Monday morning. Rain tapped against the courthouse windows like a ticking clock. Inside, every seat in the chamber was filled. Media, activists, off-duty officers, professors, clergy, everyone seemed to have a stake in what was about to unfold. This wasn't a trial, not yet. It was a public hearing convened by the city to restore trust between police and the people. It had no legal power, but everyone knew the world was watching. And at the center of the room stood Jordan Peterson in a dark navy suit waiting to speak. Behind him, the panel sat in a long arc, a mix of lawmakers, civil rights leaders, and senior law enforcement. At the far left sat Chief Ramirez. At the far right, Rosa McAllen. Peterson approached the microphone. The room hushed instantly. "I wasn't planning to speak today," he began, voice steady. But the silence felt like complicity. He paused, looked around. What happened to me was wrong. But what's more troubling is how normal it felt to everyone watching. A murmur rippled through the back of the chamber. People didn't react with shock, they reacted with recognition, because they've seen it before. Maybe not with professors, maybe not on Fifth Avenue, but in neighborhoods we forget, on people we ignore. He looked down at his hands. The question isn't what happens to me. The question is what happens to the next person who asks a question and gets slapped instead of answered. He stepped back. No applause, just silence. Dense, thick silence. Then Chief Ramirez stood. "I've worn this badge for 30 years, she said. "And I've spent the last 3 wondering if we trained officers to follow law or to assert control." She turned to face the audience. "We failed. Not just Jordan Peterson, but the citizens who fear us when they should trust us." She turned back to the panel. "I'm launching a full audit of use of force cases from the last 5 years, publicly, and I invite oversight from civilian boards and legal experts." Someone gasped. Another began clapping. The room shifted. Later, outside, a young man with dreadlocks approached Peterson. "My brother got slammed to the ground last year for asking a cop why he was being searched," he said. "No cameras that day, no hashtags." "I'm sorry," Peterson said. "You didn't cause this," the man replied, "but maybe you helped show it." By nightfall, a movement was coalescing, not around Peterson but around a shared demand: accountability. Hendricks, watching alone from a distant motel room, clicked the TV off. He picked up his phone, then put it down again. He was afraid, not of prison, but of looking in a mirror and finally seeing what everyone else saw. Si esta historia ya te tocó el corazón, suscríbete al canal y cuéntanos en los comentarios. ¿Qué crees que está pasando realmente? Ahora, continuemos. 1 week later, Jordan Peterson stood at the edge of Battery Park, facing the Statue of Liberty across the grey waters. The wind whipped his coat against his legs. Tourists walked nearby, some stopping to stare, others too wrapped in their own lives to notice. It was early, just past 7 a.m., and the city hadn't fully woken up. He liked it this way, quiet, undemanding. Behind him, the country was still rumbling. Editorials had been written, protests had slowed but not ended. Policy drafts were in motion, lawsuits filed, podcasts recorded, all of it spinning in the wake of one moment, one slap, a sound, a gesture, a spark. And yet, the deeper wound wasn't about bruised skin. It was about faith, in systems, in fairness, in what it means to speak and be heard without fear. Footsteps approached from behind. Dr. Peterson, he turned. A woman maybe in her 40s, nervous, polite. She held a folded envelope in her hands. I didn't want to bother you, My husband and I watched the hearing. He's a public school teacher in Queens. He says your words made him feel like someone finally put language to what he's been afraid to say for years. Peterson nodded gently. What's his name? Luis. He couldn't come today. She handed him the envelope. It's just a note. No money. No big words. Just thanks. He accepted it with both hands, like something sacred. Tell him I said he matters, he said. She walked away without asking for a photo. He stayed a few minutes longer, then turned and made his way through the park, the city now beginning to stir. Horns in the distance, distant laughter, a radio somewhere playing Sinatra. At a corner bench, an old man was feeding pigeons. He looked up. You're him, right? He asked. Peterson nodded. I liked what you said, not because you're famous, but because it didn't sound like politics. It sounded like stillness. Peterson sat down beside him. Stillness is hard to find these days, especially after the noise, the man said, tossing another handful of crumbs. But that slap? It made everyone look up, even the ones who didn't want to. They sat there for a while, not speaking, just breathing in the weight of a moment that had somehow become a mirror for a nation. Later, back at his hotel, Peterson opened the envelope. Inside was a single handwritten line. Thank you for not hitting back. He folded the note, slipped it into the back of his journal. The news would move on, the headlines would shift, but for those who felt the deeper current, something had changed. Not because a man was slapped, but because he didn't slap back. And that choice echoed louder than the hand that struck him.